Today, we're investigating the historical reality of one of history's most infamous and honestly deeply misunderstood political figures. His name is mentioned every single week in churches around the entire world. But how does the traditional biblical narrative actually compare to the hard archaeological and historical evidence? Well, let's dive right in and find out. We really have to ask who he was behind all the mythological layers that have built up over 2 millennia. I mean, was he the ruthless, stubborn tyrant that ancient historians like Flavius Josephus and Philo of Alexandria paint him to be? A cruel, inflexible leader who just callously handed down death sentences without a second thought? Or, on the flip side, as the traditional gospel narrative suggests, was he just an overwhelmed bureaucrat caught in this impossible political pressure cooker? Just a hesitant, reluctant judge, haunted by a decision that would echo through history? Today, we're separating the archaeological findings and historical texts from those traditional narratives to uncover the real, untold story of the man whose choice changed the world forever. Section 1. Who was Pontius Pilate? To truly understand Pilate, we have to look at the hard evidence regarding his appointment as a Roman governor under Emperor Tiberius. Now, for literally centuries, people actually doubted he even existed outside of biblical texts. But that completely changed in 1961 when archaeologists unearthed what we now call the Pilate Stone in Caesarea Maritima. It's this incredible limestone block clearly bearing his name, and it confirms his official title was Prefect of Judea, not procurator like later texts suggested. And let me tell you, his posting in first-century Judea was an absolute political powder keg. The region was fiercely resistant to Roman rule. It was just filled with constant, simmering religious tension. Any minor disturbance could abruptly end his career, or, quite frankly, his life. And his day-to-day reality perfectly illustrates the immense pressure of that role. His primary responsibilities were incredibly straightforward, yet brutally demanding. Keep the peace, collect the taxes, and protect Roman interests at absolutely all costs. Unlike the philosophical, contemplative figure we see in the Gospel of John, the guy who famously ponders what is truth, the historical Pilate revealed by archaeology and ancient historians just wasn't concerned with moral justice or philosophical debates. His job was strictly about maintaining iron-fisted order in an incredibly volatile province, all for the glory of Rome. Section 2. A politician under pressure. The historical record, particularly the detailed writings of the first-century historian Flavius Josephus, shows that Pilate's relationship with the local Jewish population was deeply strained long before any famous trials took place. Josephus records how Pilate deliberately offended local religious sensitivities on multiple occasions. In one major incident, he brought Roman military standards, which bore the emperor's image, right into the holy city of Jerusalem under the cover of night. As you can imagine, that sparked massive protests. Later on, he actually used sacred temple funds to build an aqueduct, which led to a huge riot that he brutally suppressed. So these early controversies severely damaged his reputation and really cranked up the overall provincial tensions, making him a politician under immense pressure, where one single wrong move meant absolute disaster. Section 3. The Trial That Changed History. This brings us to the climax around the year 30 CE, when a Galilean preacher named Jesus was brought before him. The local religious leaders accused Jesus of serious theological offenses, but Pilate, being a Roman prefect, simply didn't care about Jewish religious debates. That wasn't his jurisdiction, and it certainly wasn't his concern. So, to force his hand, the leaders strategically reframed the charges. They presented Jesus as a rival king. Now, a claim to kingship was a direct charge of sedition against Roman authority. It was an outright challenge to Emperor Tiberius himself. Suddenly, this minor religious dispute was transformed into a massive political threat, and Pilate literally had no choice but to pay attention. Talk about being caught between a rock and a hard place. This is an absolutely impossible dilemma. According to the traditional gospel accounts, Pilate questions Jesus and seems uncharacteristically reluctant to condemn him, finding no real basis for execution, which honestly is a stark contrast to the ruthless, decisive man described by historians like Philo. But tensions in the city are rapidly escalating. Pilate is looking at a massive scale tipping right in front of him. Let an ostensible rebel go and risk a massive riot that destroys his career and enrages Rome, or execute him to satisfy the crowd, eliminate a potential threat, and keep the Roman peace. Section 4. The hand-washing moment. So that unbearable tension culminates in one of the most famous gestures in all of human history. According to the Gospel of Matthew, Pilate publicly washes his hands of the decision. And we literally still use this exact phrase today. When we want to describe walking away from accountability for a tough decision, we say we're washing our hands of it. It is just incredible how this singular action from a first-century Roman governor has embedded itself so deeply into our everyday language and cultural consciousness. But we have to ask, did this moment actually happen as depicted? Historians are quick to note that this hand-washing gesture is only found in the Gospel of Matthew. And again, it contrasts sharply with the decisive, unyielding Pilate found in the archaeological and historical record. So how do we even interpret it? Was it genuine inner turmoil from a truly reluctant judge? Was it just calculated political theater designed to pacify the crowd while absolving himself of the blame? Or, as some scholars suggest, was it a later theological addition by early writers trying to shift blame away from Roman authorities to make Christianity more palatable to the Roman Empire? The historical and biblical accounts leave us deeply divided on what his true motives really were. Ultimately, we have to look at the brutal reality of Roman governance to understand why the execution was authorized in the first place. Passover was approaching. Historical records confirm that Jerusalem during Passover was packed with hundreds of thousands of pilgrims, and the atmosphere was famously combustible. Nationalist fervor was always at an all-time high during this festival celebrating liberation. A public disturbance of that scale could easily lead to a massive rebellion, a horrific bloodbath, and ultimately Pilate's own execution by a very unforgiving Rome. So, faced with that mounting pressure, he bowed to pure political expediency and authorized the crucifixion. Section 5. An enduring historical mystery. So, what happened after the dust settled? Following the year 30 CE, his brutal pragmatism finally caught up with him. The historian Josephus records that several years later, Pilate violently suppressed a gathering of Samaritans at Mount Gerizim, slaughtering many who were simply looking for sacred artifacts. The outrage was so severe that the local population formally complained to the Roman legate of Syria, a guy named Vitellius. Rome finally had enough of his heavy-handed tactics. Pilate was removed from office and ordered back to Rome to stand trial before the emperor. And after that, the historical record simply goes blank. Did he live out his days in disgrace? Did he take his own life? We honestly just don't know. And so, how do we remember him today? When we compare the archaeological stones and historical texts against the traditional biblical narratives, we are left with a really fractured portrait. To history, he was a ruthless enforcer of Roman order who ruled with an iron fist. To biblical tradition, he is a symbol of moral weakness and political compromise, a man who saw a profoundly difficult situation and chose self-preservation over justice. He isn't remembered for grand military victories or sweeping civic reforms. He is remembered solely as the complex, contradictory man behind a single, world-altering judgment. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly powerful thought. Sometimes a single choice can shape history forever. It leaves us wondering just how fragile history really is when one pressured bureaucrat's desperate compromise can echo for 2 millennia. What does that say about the choices we make under pressure? Think about that the next time you're forced to make a difficult decision. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring the incredible historical realities hiding behind the stories we think we know.